Okay. Does this work?
Perfect. Let me see if I got mine going.
What's yours this week? Oh God, I love that. You know what? That is the face. There's a couple things that stick out.
That's 2020, isn't it?
That's 2020. Tiger King's 2020. That just shows you the kind of like the world we're living right now. Shit's burning, dumpster fire, and all that stuff. And we're looking at that guy and Tiger King and talking about it.
You better believe it.
So anyway, all right, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to Round the Rotary podcast, and it's brought to you by Capital Petroleum Consultants, CPC specialized in project engineering and well site supervision in all disciplines of the oil and gas industry. Contact us through www.capitalpetroleumconsultants.com to see what CPC can do for you today. And today's guest, I don't think needs introduction, is David Ramsden Wood, DRW, the Hot Take of the Day podcast blog, author of What the F is Wrong with Everyone Else, What They Don't Teach You in Business School. And then that's available on Amazon, correct?
It sure is.
And the number one public enemy of LinkedIn currently. So as you were banned recently, about a month ago, 2 months ago?
You know, it's about 2 months ago now. Yeah, I think it was right around the end of September.
Have you been getting on? Have you been able to get on LinkedIn lately and seeing kind of not at all?
Not at all. There's no mechanism for me to get on currently. So, I mean, it's an interesting topic, right? And I know it's one that's really salient amongst society right now with Twitter and flags and false narratives and clearly the influence in the election and you know the echo media, the echo chamber that is social media. It's a big topic, but yes, still banned. Letter coming from my lawyer today to try and sort of get back on. So we'll see where that goes.
All right. Well, good luck to that. And I kind of let's just dive in. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And for those that you know need a background about DRW, I mean, he's been on many podcasts. He speaks at many industry events. I think you can just kind of tune in to whether it's digital wildcatters or something like that, or flipping the barrel. And you've been on a bunch of them that kind of discuss your background. But I kind of want to talk about what's going on today. And kind of recently what's going on in your life, and kind of talk about this censorship, people are preaching, First Amendment, then people, but at the same time, it's one of those things where it's First Amendment, it's the private platform. So I kind of want to talk about, I mean, could the hot take of the day be where it's at today without LinkedIn?
100% not. And, most people know the story, how it started. I wasn't trying to have a hashtag.
Mm-hmm.
I had talked to a publisher about getting the book published. And once we'd sold the company in 2018, I'd written this book in 2012, 2013, and said, now is the time, because, it's not a story of how we sold our company. It's a story of all the things that occurred when my life took a different path that got me on the path to be able to build a company that we sold. And so I called the publisher and I was like, hey, how do I publish a book? And they said, well, there's 4,000 books a day that are published in planet Earth. So you sort of need a social media following. Do you have one? And I didn't. And the only account I had was a LinkedIn account. And
right.
So I started publishing, totally randomly, and it grew from there.
Well, So how did you take that stance? I know that first post was about, dear, was it a Concho EOG?
Concho EOG.
Yeah, I remember that first post. But I mean, everyone right now, everyone's like, okay, build a following. Yeah. It seems like it happened with you, and not taking away anything from your work, but it kind of, you kind of spitting off the cuff, kind of speaking, kind of what you see, no bullshit around it. Like, I guess what I'm at, like, build a following. Like, so you just went out there, posted something. It wasn't controversial, but it was kind of like calling people out, holding the mirror up against these operators.
Yeah.
And so, build a following, and it just kind of happened that way.
Yeah, it did. And it was very organic. I didn't promote it. I didn't sell it. I wasn't trying to do anything other than post real shit.
Yeah.
I think that people, that resonated, because I wasn't just a blogger. I do find it amazing that I'm probably better known for the hot take of the day than I am for anything I did in my career. And the irony is, I should be known for what I did in my career, but I'm known for the hot take. And And so had I been more thoughtful about building a brand, and had I attempted to build a brand, it wouldn't have had the same edginess.
Right.
Because in order to attract a wider range, you have to have a narrower degree of controversy. And I certainly saw coming in March when COVID happened.
Right.
And I was certainly one of the first writers about it to say COVID was going to be extraordinarily bad for our industry. I was on CNBC Fast Money with Brian Sullivan and said oil is going to hit zero. And that was March 18th. And at the time, very few people in the world were saying that. And to me, it was obvious. But the point being, I really lost followers and fans because of my COVID stance. And it came across as callous and uncaring because it sounded like I was saying the economy first, old people second. And that's my method of communication to make a point. Had I been more thoughtful about the brand, maybe I wouldn't have said that, but I stand by everything I said back then. And I would say that I am more correct than not based on the things I said then. And people have now been migrating more to my position. I just usually get there early when it's like this crazy controversial thing.
Well, I mean, but what sucks about that is honestly, like we live in this world where social media, it's like if you take one stance on something and it's slightly controversial, then you want the extreme opposite. For example, hey, let's open up restaurants so they're not at 25% capacity. And next thing you know, the counter argument is that it's like, well, DRW, you want everyone to die. It's like, no, I'm not saying that. I feel like you can't take a stance that's against kind of what's kind of the news mainstream is pushing, because if you do, it's like, well, I think schools should be open. Oh, so DRW, you want every teacher to die in America? It's like, that's not what I'm saying at all. But it's amazing that people can get to the polar opposite of that point when you're trying to, and the fact is you're not basing, I mean, I've read a lot of your stuff. You don't base your stuff based on kind of what the mainstream media is throwing out and stuff. It's facts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's facts and hard data.
Absolutely. And again, so it's ironic, right? People ask me like, how did I feel about being banned on LinkedIn? The reason that I was banned on LinkedIn, and so I posted all the letters to the website, was effectively that I was saying there was virtually zero chance for an under 50-year-old who is healthy to die of COVID. Now, not only is that fact, I'm caveating with virtually, and there is no definition widely accepted of what virtually means. And for whatever reason, LinkedIn's flaggers flagged it as false information. And I know there have been others on LinkedIn who've had their posts get flagged. Yep. And it says, this is false. No one can see it. And it was odd that LinkedIn went to an outright ban with no warning. They call it an indefinite restriction. But since I can't log on the platform, and when I appealed that, there's no mechanism for an appeal other than they said, if you don't like it, contact our lawyers. It's not like the thing, if you wanted to say, hey, you were wearing panties on your face to make the point that masks don't work, you're a public health risk. That might have been a better thing. Allowing me to take down the offensive posts would be another thing. So the fact that LinkedIn deplatformed an influencer who had, close to 20,000 followings, close to 30,000 views a day, a very, very large cadre, I would have influenced people in the election. And the timing of that ban vis-a-vis the election, vis-a-vis Twitter adding the false flags going up, the shutting down accounts of the New York Post, etc. I mean, it looks from an outside view like a very coordinated effort by the mainstream media and social media to deplatform those who were of the conservative mindset. And when you look at polls, I mean, when people ask, was there cheating in the election? Probably on both sides. But I would say that the biggest form of cheating was if you're in Wisconsin and you're told that Biden is going to win by 10 percentage points and you don't love Trump as a candidate, and quite frankly, you're a libertarian, which I am as well, you're going to vote for Joe Jorgensen as the libertarian candidate. And in Wisconsin, the gap of margin was the libertarian votes. So if you had told libertarians it's going to be so close, you have to take all your votes for Trump in order to get the right candidate, because libertarians don't want Biden in. Right. So they would vote for Trump. In Colorado, there was zero chance that that Trump was going to carry the state. Right. So voting libertarian would not have been it's not a thrown away vote because it just doesn't matter. But the polls influenced Republicans to not vote Republican. And I think that more than anything is what influenced the outcome of the election.
So it's not a question. It's not a question of what party you support or anything like that. It's just having the opportunity, having the platform to kind of voice whatever opinion that is. And it's really not opinion. I mean, the ban you got, you were linking CDC, right?
Yeah. One sentence that was flagged was a direct sentence from the CDC website that said 6% of COVID deaths are only as a result of COVID. The other 94% have an average of 2.6 comorbidities. And it showed up on the CDC and they flagged it as bold and false. And I was like, and I was sort of loud. I sent them the copy from the website. And I'm like, how can you say this is false? It's like literally on the CDC website. So yeah, and the question is it a First Amendment right because it's a private platform?
Right.
They monetize the eyeballs for free content created, and they encourage people to build a brand on their platform. And they then get Section 230 protection against liability for hate speech on their platform. Now, in order for that to apply, they can't censor anyone. So you can't have 230 protection and deplatform people without an appeal.
Okay.
That's the core issue. Now, is there really something you can do about it legally? I hope so. But really, Congress needs to act so that social media becomes a utility and it's regulated as such, which is to say, as long as you're not calling for death or violence or hate crimes, then they're protected, but you're able to build your platform and they can't use algorithms to repress what they've asked for. That's a big ask. I don't know that it will ever happen. I think we've very clearly seen during 2020 how much influence peddling there is in Washington. And those guys have huge capital bases and huge lobbyists. So is it ever going to happen? I don't think so. But I think it's a really important point because we've built this thing that is our news. People read 280 characters on Twitter and that's how they inform themselves. And I think it's tremendously scary.
So with, I guess with everything, because obviously censorship and, people getting banned, you're seeing, since you left, you're seeing that constantly on LinkedIn. And first off, LinkedIn got a lot more during the elections, got a lot more Facebooky. But anyway, that being said, there's different platforms, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook is, for sharing, it was for sharing, family and babies, and like trips to the lake, you know what I mean? But now it's kind of, it's evolved into something completely different, same thing as Twitter. So you're kind of seeing kind of other platforms kind of pop up like Parler, that Rumble, whatever, all that. So you're seeing all these different kind of like segmented different, social media platforms that I guess serve kind of towards more, if you're worried about censorship and you kind of want to engage in controversial topics and you go over here, or if you want to talk about, work and all that stuff, you go over here and all that stuff. Are you utilizing any other platforms besides Twitter? Or are you like jumping on this new trend of these new Parler and all that stuff?
So I have to be honest, I struggle. And I struggle again because I wasn't building a brand and then I had a brand, but the platform I chose to build the brand on, and a lot of people say, well, that wasn't what LinkedIn was for, or LinkedIn is for professional. I would make the case, the people who use it just for like, I need a job, that's not what LinkedIn is for. It's a professional community. And people are kidding themselves if they don't think that politics and coronavirus and the economy are not all interrelated to your profession. And I made friends with people I've never met before on LinkedIn just based on comments. So I think it's a very valuable platform and I reject the premise that you shouldn't be posting this, that, or the other thing. People can read it or they don't have to. It doesn't matter. But the person I was on LinkedIn, because nobody was anonymous and I was standing behind my reputation and everybody else who said something had to stand behind their reputation. And there were 1,300 characters opposed. I was able to dialogue and converse in a much more thorough and, and there were less trolls until COVID.
Yeah.
I find Twitter hard. I've done a better job. I went off in April because it was bad. It was bad for me personally, like as like a health thing. There was just too much trolls and people would come at me and I would come at them back. And I know that the answer is don't like respond. And people are like, well, you should look at their followers. And if they have less than 1,000 followers, you shouldn't even respond. But that's not what I am. So people would be like, shut up, DRW. You don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, okay, well, let's look at my career and my success in oil and gas. And there's really no other measure of success that I know of in that industry than money.
Yeah.
And I always said, and I said it in my book, and I approached my career like a professional athlete. And I said, I was going to be the Tiger Woods of oil and gas.
Right.
So there's no tournament for me to compete with this a non-troll. So I said, let's look at career earnings and let me know if you're better than me. And then people freaked out that I would say something like that. And how could I be so mean and insensitive?
How dare you? You base your career off of financial success.
Oh, and you're just, isn't it nice? And so anyway, the point being that my Twitter personality is really combative.
Yeah.
My podcast personality is really inquisitive. My blog personality is really calling people out. And my book personality was very introspective. So the challenge with me and the brand and the social media is I'm not promoting a brand. I sort of evolve based on what the platform is. So I haven't gone to Parler or Facebook or any of these other things because I don't understand them. If I had my druthers, I would get back on LinkedIn and then I would do the 7 hottest takes of all time as my like re-entry and start with Ruth Bader Ginsburg was selfish for not retiring when Obama could have replaced her because she knew if she stopped working, she would die. And it was her selfishness that is the reason that the Republicans now have 6-3 on the Supreme Court. Hot take of the day, #1.
Hashtag.
And I mean, again, and people should be thoughtful about that, right? Is everything is about trade-offs and like no one is innocent. And I deeply respect. I'm liberal socially. I'm fiscally conservative, which unfortunately that doesn't exist. So I'm as libertarian probably as they come. And I have deep respect for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but I also know a lot of people who the day they retire, they die. And I also know through coronavirus, we are so terrified of our mortality. And the fact that like in Italy, when they did the first lockdown, there's evidence that China was pushing a social media campaign to encourage lockdowns in Italy because they'd already set the template in China, which made no sense because they were having 45 cases in 1.4 billion people. The math didn't make any sense, and they were taking people from their families and quarantining them in hotels and like welding the door.
I saw that.
Yeah, and then a hotel collapsed when they did that. But then in Italy, which was the first country to impose lockdowns, there is some evidence, and there's been writing on the internet, and again, it's not tinfoil hatty, but that the Chinese Communist Party was pushing a social media trolling campaign to encourage the lockdowns. Because once you set lockdowns in Italy, then Spain would follow, France would follow, UK would follow, US would follow, which we did. Yep. And then now there's no way out. And what happened? We were in a trade war with China for 2 years. And without firing a bullet, you read all of the economy and why is the stock market at all-time high? Why is oil still 41? Well, Asia's been very resilient during this. Amazing. So they won the trade war without a shot being fired, got rid of the president that was holding them to task, and they did it by using social media and shutting down in Italy, where the average age of death was over 80, which is older than the average life expectancy on Earth, in a society that kisses, touches, hugs, smokes. And drinks.
Yep.
And so no one sits back and says, was our response the right response given we didn't know the data. Yeah, we did. We knew all of it in March. And you can read all my blogs from March and April. The Diamond Princess was a perfect example where 3,700 passengers and crew were shipping around the world. And the coronavirus came. There was no masks. There was no ventilation. They were generally all old people. And of the 3,700 people on the ship, and before you catch it, right, it takes 4 to 6 days for symptoms to show up in the 95th percentile. So before anyone gets sick, they're all on the cruise ship, eating, touching, dancing, hugging. Okay, and it's the most infectious thing ever. So 700 people out of 3,700 catch it, which is about 20%, which is what people estimate is the level of herd immunity that we already have, because coronavirus, this one's new, but there have been other strains. So 80% herd mentality was already reached. 700 people got it, and 7 died. And I think at the end of the time, the ultimate number was 14. So the death rate was 1 to 2% on an infection rate of 20% on a cruise ship that was not allowed to land anywhere. We knew it in March. If you had extrapolated those numbers to a death rate, it was never 5%. It was always sub 1. Coronavirus is less lethal for young people than flu. And it just, again, we just went down this path without thinking, because social media triggers at 280 character, death, dying, death, dying, death, dying. Okay, I mean, I don't want people to die, but like everyone does. And
I'm going to send you. I'm going to send you a link after we get off. It was on Data is Beautiful, and it kind of talks about kind of just the basic facts and kind of what you're talking about, like the infection rates. You know, if you're 75 years or older with 3 or more pre-existing conditions, then you're more likely to die from this. But the interesting thing that got me from all these stats and all the the transferable rate and all that stuff was the amount of times COVID was mentioned by the news. I mean, it takes SARS. It talks about HIV. It talks about all the bubonic, all these past illnesses. Whatever it is, and those are small. Maybe like 7 million times the news has said it, or 4 million times the news. COVID was 2.1 billion.
Yeah,
billion. And that just, I mean, if that doesn't, and honestly, I don't think. What do you think? I mean, I don't think us as a society has evolved to process the amount of information that is being poured down our throats, because our phones are always available. We're always checking our phones. It's like going to the refrigerator. You know what I mean? When you're bored, you just open it up and check it. And because of the phone, and because of all the news being thrown down your face, and the news is always constantly on, they're always pushing the same whatever agenda that they're going for. Because to me, Fox and CNN, to me, they're entertainment channels. You know what I mean? They're reporting something. They're telling you how to feel about it, right? Which I think is bullshit. But I don't think we've evolved to kind of process and kind of think for ourselves on what information is being thrown down us through the social media and our phones always being on us.
Well, I think there's 2 things there. There's number one, what is the business model of Facebook and the news media? The business model is they attract eyeballs to which they sell ads. And you as a podcaster and me as a podcaster know, like, guests are free, content is free, the equipment is cheap, the barriers to entry. So the only thing that you have to build a viewership is the quality of the guest, the quality of the host, and then advertising revenue. And so, of course, these are big businesses that are going to cater to their ads. So, we think they're doing us a service, but they're not. They're simply selling a product. And then number 2, and I'll quote a friend of mine, and I think it's absolutely true. And this isn't, again, it's not meant to be offensive. Most people are C students. Most people are C students.
All right.
Most people don't like math. A lot of people don't manage their own money. A lot of people don't understand the economy. If you ask them to explain the role of the Federal Reserve in the US economy and what function it plays and how stimulus or quantitative easing, if they even know what that word is, if you ask the average person to explain that, they couldn't. Which means they also can't explain supply demand in the context of the housing market, of student loans, of mortgage, of anything. And yet the media feeds you this 2 lines so you don't sound stupid. And then you form an opinion without actually doing any of the work or the math to understand. And going right back to March, number 1, my big concern was 20, 30, 40 million Americans were going to go unemployed. And typically those are the ones who can't work from home: grocery workers,
Yep.
Janitorial services, food services, etc. The restaurant and hospitality industry, last I checked, is about a 15.7 million person employer. And yeah, some of them have stayed in their jobs, but 25% capacity in a restaurant that's designed for 98% capacity means that even if the restaurant is open and people still think they have jobs, they don't actually have jobs. And so right now, we've pumped the stimulus into this, and we've talked V-shaped recovery, and the Fed's bought bonds and ETFs and stock, and they've propped up this asset bubble, which is now at all-time highs. Tesla went up this morning 13% just on the news it was going to be included in the S&P 500, because there's so many passive investors buying it. It's the most crowded trade, and there's all this liquidity. And because the Fed keeps creating and printing money, which is an inflationary event, the only way to protect against that is to own assets, which includes stocks and less so bonds, houses, hard assets. And that inflation is widening the wealth gap that was one of the huge things and points of Black Lives Matter. And now the Democrats want to put a $3 trillion additional stimulus, but no one is sitting back saying, okay, we know it kills older people. Older people are generally only participants in the economy as paying for healthcare and paying for nursing homes. Half the deaths in the United States have occurred in nursing homes. And the last time I checked, people don't leave nursing homes and then go run a marathon and re-enter the workforce. Like, you're kind of going there to die. You're going to die as something. And yet we're shutting down the economy for under 50-year-olds who've started their own business, who've started their life, who have to pay for student debt. And then when the news came out that they're encouraging Biden to wipe out $50,000 of student debts, what kind of perverse incentive is that for the people that either didn't go to college because they couldn't afford it and worked, B, picked a degree they could pay for, C, worked hard enough to earn a scholarship, or D, just finished paying off their student loans and lived with their parents and worked 3 jobs. Now we're just going to give people money to pay off their student loan, and we're going to name COVID as the reason. I mean, that is just a lack of understanding of how the economy works and who the participants are. And we've built this thing in the last 7 months where we've lost track of the whole point of life in society.
I can't agree with you more. I mean, when this first thing, when things first started happening with, with COVID and the lockdown and stuff, I was like, okay, well, I support this. Let's look at this. Let's think about this. Let's lock in. So once kind of things started kind of evolving, and then the information started coming out, I was kind of the same boat as you. I mean, was the reaction worth the risk? That's what I've asked myself. And there's a lot of things that the news isn't reporting, such as, your focus is on the economy, but you also focus on other things too. I don't have the numbers, but I'm curious to see, how, has cancer rates, deaths dropped, has other stuff dropped, suicide rates, depression, child abuse, domestic abuse, alcoholism, drug use. I mean, there's so many different other sides of negative sides of what occurs when the government is saying everyone has to stay home. Your family, you have to stay home and you cannot go to work.
I mean, with 100% certainty. So again, people are like, why are you so focused on the economy? Well, because the economy is health. If your kids can't finish high school and go to college or trade school or just get a job, if there's no economy, they can't work. If they have no income, they can't survive. So the economy is life. Without the economy, there's no healthcare. Without the economy, there's no, we used to have in the 1300s, the average life expectancy was 30.
Right.
We now live to 80. So the economy is very important. And I will say, and I'm sure other people are in this boat, I for sure have gained 20 pounds during COVID.
Stop working out.
I haven't talked, but I wake up every day with the shakes from alcohol withdrawal. And I know that I'm going to have to deal with that in the very near future, because the level of alcohol consumption that I do is beyond anything I've ever done, which leads to overwhelming depression. And, I'm deeply considering pulling my sons from school and having to take a gap year and they're 13 and 15. Because I'm like, what is the point of rushing? Because what I see civil war in the streets. I see a trade war that, even though no one wants to admit it, that China won, that the US will retaliate for, which will lead to long-term conflict with bullets. That's what I see, and it's all because of COVID, which was, whether it was manufactured in a lab or not tinfoily. What we know is that Wuhan shut down flights to domestic China, but left international flights open when they were dealing with this in January.
Okay.
So without a doubt, they were shutting it down internal to China while making sure the rest of the world had it. Now, it's a virus, and virus can virus. So it was going to get out anyway.
Right.
But it was a war move, and we just won't acknowledge it as that because it's our biggest trade partner, and it has so many ramifications on supply chains around the world that you can't call China out for what they did. And they accomplished what they wanted, which was getting rid of Trump. So 4 more years of Trump was going to be bad for China. 4 more years of Biden is good for China.
All right. But I mean, it seems to me like if you say something's very calculated, I mean, you obviously speak, from the heart, off the cuff and all stuff, but it's all backed up with data, because that's what you speak. You're transparent and you data. That's kind of where you base your information. So right now you're speaking very logical. You're speaking very rational. And that being said, how do you convince, because this COVID is really based on, I mean, I call it's kind of like after 9/11 where you can't check your bag in at the gate anymore. You have to take off your shoes going on a plane. Like, it's the illusion of safety brought on by fear, right?
Absolutely.
And I feel like, and I don't know, I would hope that we go back to where we were, and what is the new normal, whatever we want to call it. But I mean, I think now, you're going to always have these plexiglass right in front of you, in front of the stores. You're going to have the servers continue to wear masks, and you're going to have continued like the hand sanitizer. So it's always going to be a constant reminder, I feel, of this pandemic that we're faced. So how do you communicate this platform without, I guess, not pushing the people on the fringe away, but how do you communicate? Because a lot of decisions from the news based off of what fear, feeling, and emotion, right? So how do you communicate, I guess, what you're saying to those people on the fringe who are without pushing them away? Because usually when you, I guess, promote your, when you go on Facebook, it's like, oh, look what the libtards are doing, or look what the Republicans are doing. It always pushes people away.
Of course.
So how do you communicate effectively to those that are out there?
I mean, it's a great question, and what we see in society is that there are those who control platforms.
Right.
And the platforms are the one that drive it. Money is the thing that drives it, and politics is the thing that drives it. And it is an unbelievably unpopular opinion to say that people are going to die. And I did a post, and it got me so many trolls on LinkedIn, and I'm sure it was one of the things that led to a drop in fans. I've never done it for fans, but just like as a statement, where I said 667,000 deaths is 100% acceptable, because you just cannot shut down an economy, because the overarching trade-off for that is going to be way worse. People don't want to hear that logically. They feel everything emotionally, and then, as you said, they attack with, "Oh, you just want to kill my grandma."
Yeah.
Well, no. What I want is that people who are at risk know they're at risk. They're either old, or you're diabetic, or you're unhealthy, you're obese, you have COPD. There's a lot of things. So, number one, you should wear an N95 mask, because the cloth masks are not as effective as N95. You should clean it. You should have a new one every day. You should not touch it, and you should wear it and limit your interactions with people. Don't go to parties, don't go to restaurants, don't travel, stay in your house until you can get vaccinated. But for me, I'm not going to get it. And if I get it, I'm going to feel sick for a day or two, and I'm going to be fine. And if I die, I die. That's totally acceptable to me. Yep. So how do you communicate that? I think people need to ask, like, what is the way out? I agree. The plexiglass in front of things, I actually don't mind that, like, as an innovation. I don't see why you wouldn't do it. I think the problem I have with masks, like what I'm doing right now, is you can't read my facial expressions, my body language, and you can't read my lips. And so I think so much of the human experience and interaction is based on reading. Like the fight or flight from when you were like, you know, the dawn of man was you needed to judge if this person was a friend or a foe and react accordingly. And if you take the face away in your only eyes, I think that really dehumanizes all of society.
Well, what is it? 90% of communication is
nonverbal.
And I make stats up all the time.
No, but it's very high. So I don't think that we can have a world with masks. I also think that the number one problem is the government will not indemnify businesses against coronavirus. In fact, California passed something and signed into law in May that if an employee who is deemed an essential worker is tested positive for COVID, the onus is on the employer to prove that it did not come from work. And if they miss time, their workers' comp kicks in to pay for the people. The onus is on the employer to prove that they didn't get COVID at work, even though people go out for dinner and interact in all the things. So number one, if government was smart, which they're not, and if they were actually caring about public health, number one, you would indemnify all businesses for COVID-related transmission to employees or to staff. So now stores can make their own guidelines for what they want. Number two, you make sure that employees are not fired if they're afraid. So you add a protected class where if you truly have a health issue, you can't be a 30-year-old millennial that works out all the time that wants to work from home because it's fun.
Yeah.
And then you want to go to Cuba and work from the beach and this is very convenient. But if you have a legitimate health issue, you are a protected class and can't be fired. And if government did those two things, we would see businesses respond rather than government clamping down. And the unfortunate thing is no one will do it. And then the final one is, if you really care about my health, why did you allow alcohol sales during the lockdown? Yeah. You know that those are bad. Why did you allow cigarettes? You know that this is a respiratory disease.
Yep.
Why did you allow McDonald's, which is, processed food, high caloric intake? They changed the menu for COVID so it no longer has salads on it. And so you're eating unhealthy food that creates insulin resistance, leads to diabetes, which is one of the comorbidities of this. And the CDC nowhere says, and everyone should work out every day. So the gyms are open and we encourage everyone to get fit. Like if you really cared about this disease, that's what you would have done. Yeah. But we didn't do that. We left everything open. We left the big box stores open. We didn't ban alcohol. We didn't ban cigarettes. We didn't ban McDonald's. We didn't encourage working out. We just said everyone stay home, drink, get fat.
Stay on your couch and watch Tiger King.
And Netflix is going to do really, really well. So it's just the intellectual dishonesty and inconsistency in our politicians is really struggling. So to circle back to what do you do? How do you send the message? All I can do is say it to your guests, to the people that listen to my show, although I do the interviewing on my show, so I'm less open like this. And then people have to make up their own mind. And they have to decide what they want their life to be, and that's it.
I'm curious. I'm curious about you personally, because I mean, when all this stuff, when the shit hit the fan and all that stuff, and I found myself waking up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 after drinking, because there's nothing else to do, and checking the news and all that stuff. It got to a point where it was disrupting my sleep. It was disrupting my attitude, my mood, my relationship with my family, my wife, my daughter, my friends. So I was like, all right. Screw this. Like, stop checking the news. I kind of took the path of ignorance is bliss. And I read your most recent blog where you just kind of want to sometimes steer your car in oncoming traffic just because the amount of people that, anyway, the government's react. Yeah, the entire world pretty much. So how are you kind of, I guess, continue to speak your platform and not want to bang your head against the wall and say, screw it, and just kind of like, how is the constant bullshit? How do you deal with that? I mean, how do you balance it besides booze?
Honestly, I think it's a great question. And then the honest answer is I haven't done well. I write less than I used to. I love the podcast, as you know. The advice I always would say to people is the best thing about a podcast is you learn to listen. Like when you're in a role where you need to take input and communicate, you can listen. And you can listen to other people's points of view that are different than yours. And then you can pick threads, which is why, and I'm sure you're the same way, I don't do any interview prep. I read about the person. I know if they read a book, I try and remember the title, although sometimes I forget. But then I listen, and then we pick threads that are interesting from what they say, and the conversation goes where it goes.
Right.
And, but no, how have I dealt with it? No, it's been very, very hard on my personal relationships. I've lost a lot of friends, in part because of the politics of it. And someone asked yesterday, like, why did this do this? And I think because we've learned not to talk about religion, we've learned not to talk about politics, we've learned not to talk about money, we've learned not to talk about sex. Like those are sort of the things at dinner.
I think they teach you not to talk about that at a dinner table. It's like religion, sex, and politics. And so the problem with COVID is that the response to COVID, your personal view is based on whether you're an individualist or a collective goodist. And an individualist is generally Republican or libertarian, which means freedoms, choice, government as small as possible, as limited a role as possible, get out of my bedroom, get out of my house, get out of my life. So therefore, the response of Republicans to coronavirus is like, I don't care about other people. And that sounds horrible. But to Democrats who are, build social safety nets, have social Medicare, have infrastructure, have healthcare, create jobs, stimulate the economy, pay off people's debt. There's always a reason that's like, well, it's not for me, it's for someone else. And so this whole wear a mask for someone else, and you're selfish if you don't wear a mask. So coronavirus was the only thing we could talk about. And by its nature, it divides along political lines because of the philosophy that you have based on your view of the world. And so it threw everything out there, and it divides friends, it divides families, where, you and your wife might have been like different politically, but you sort of avoided it. I've seen that.
One spouse is frigging crazy. Don't go outside. The kids can't travel. We need to test them every day and report it to the school. And I'm like, I'm never getting my kids a COVID test because I don't want the school to shut down because there's 99.997% chance they survive. Yeah. And all with their peers. And why do teachers get treated differently than grocery workers? Like if masks and distancing work and all the kids are wearing it full time in school, then why the hell are teachers worried that they're going to get sick? They're not, because otherwise they don't work. And then why the hell are we wearing them? Anyway, so no, it's not been good. It's not been good for my relationships or my psyche. And I don't know where that goes. I don't see an end to it.
Well, it just sucks that I blame, social media and all that stuff. I mean, for pulling the political parties apart where there's no middle ground. You know what I mean? I mean, you could be, Republican, be like, I support gay marriage. It's like, oh, you libtard and all. It's like, no, that's not really the case. Or it's like, I'm kind of, I don't feel sick. I'm gonna wash my hands and all that stuff. I don't see my family. They're in, Connecticut and all that stuff. So it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna choose not to. And then suddenly it's like, well, you're choosing this. So that means you definitely want the opposite thing to happen. Kind of what we just talked about earlier. It's like, okay, if you choose not to do this and you want people to die. And unfortunately, it's gotten such a polarized world we live in. It's just that's why I kind of have to unplug a little bit. Because it's like, there's more similarities than differences, in my opinion. I mean, my daughter was telling me the other day, and we were walking the park. She's like, Daddy, who do you want? And she's 7. She's like, Daddy, who do you want to win, Trump or Biden? And I was like, what? And so I had a conversation about politics with her. I said, look, if there's a kitty cat news channel that they're promoting cats and they hate dogs, and there's a dog news channel that are promoting dogs and hate cats, I mean, they both love pets. You know what I mean? So unfortunately, you're just kind of pulled to the side. So it's just unfortunate. Kind of the world we're living in. Would you have changed your tone at all if you knew that you're about to be banned on LinkedIn, or would you have, diluted it?
No, I wouldn't. No. So for good or for bad, there's a reason I've been fired a lot in my career. Is I will not take a knee and I won't kiss the ring. And for good or for bad, this is me. I recognize it in an organization, for instance. This can have about probably a 2 or 3 year effectiveness, especially if I have a boss, right? Because you need catalyst, you need change, you need energy, you need vision, you need to build the thing. And then you build the thing, and then, especially in a hierarchical organization, people want, well, just fall in line and tell the people to do this. We need an employee handbook. Well, no, we don't need an employee handbook. No, we don't.
Yeah.
And so I would never tone anything down because I just come in as me. I think that there's value in that, but I also know that it gets really misinterpreted because, clearly for people who are listening to this who may not have heard me talk before for 52 minutes, I'm not like a kook. I'm not a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. I have concepts and strings and threads of logic that I've done a lot of research on that build a narrative that makes sense to me. And then, like in the case of China, if I were a political leader in China engaged in a trade war with the United States, I would unleash a virus on them. I would do it. And so if I would do it, and then it looks like a duck and talks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So no, I wouldn't take anything off. I wouldn't change anything. I wish I was back on LinkedIn because I miss the communication with people, and I miss the fact that, like, even though there's a website and a podcast, there is a value in these social media where you can see your 7 favorite commenters every morning just by scrolling the feed. And we have this obsession with our phones where we can't live in the world we're in. We have to live in this electronic world. Can you imagine during COVID if no one had phones?
I was thinking about that, like in the 80s. You know what I mean? Like what happened to, obviously, the 1918, Spanish flu and all that stuff. But you're right. What happens if we didn't have 18 phones or streaming Netflix? Yeah. We'd be bored out of our minds. I know that you're probably a business more, and so I don't mind kind of asking a couple more questions. What is your take? I just saw this kind of news. I kind of want to just thinking about this. What is your take on, I guess, where do you see these vaccines that are coming out? How do you see this, I guess, kind of evolving? Because chances are it's probably going to be politicized, right? Chances are it's probably going to there's going to be some bullshit that's going to make it politicized. So where do you kind of, I guess, what's your outlook on the vaccine and kind of how it helps the open economy, the oil and gas industry, all that stuff?
So I'm a data-driven guy, and a lot of people gave me a hard time for me not being an epidemiologist at the beginning of coronavirus, but we had access to the data. Now, I don't have access to all the data that I want from the Pfizer study, and then Moderna came out yesterday with their new rate. Yes. But there are smarter people than me that I've talked to, and I had one on my podcast yesterday, Ivor Cummins, who is an authority for sure on coronavirus. And he looked at the vaccine study from Pfizer, and what I am told is basically of everyone that got it, what they were testing for and what the threshold was did you have less symptoms on the vaccine than not? So JP, tell me, was your cough, was it a mild cough? Oh, okay. Well, he had the vaccine, so that's good. David, was your cough mild cough? Well, no, it was a severe cough. Okay, so the symptoms are less, so it works. And to the best of my knowledge, neither of these, the threshold was not prevents transmission. The threshold was lessen symptoms when you get it. Also, they weren't put in a room where people were coughing on them. They didn't take 45,000 volunteers, give 22,000 the vaccine and 22,000 not the vaccine, and then put them in a room and cough on them.
Right.
They just sent them out in the world, and then 90 got it that had the placebo, and 5 got it that had the vaccine with the Moderna study. So then they say, well, it's 94.5% effective. Well, what about hotspots? What if they were O positive? What if they worked out every day? What if they were using vitamin D, taking magnesium? What are the underlying conditions that led to this? Right. So to me, it's a flu. We get flu shots, and yet the flu still exists. Yeah. So coronavirus, this one is going to be with us forever. We're going to take a vaccine, which is a pharmacological solution to a problem. And Boris Johnson had it in March, and then he was exposed to someone this weekend, so he went in quarantine. Well, if he had it, doesn't he have immunity, and shouldn't he be good? So then if he's not good, then doesn't that mean a vaccine is going to have to be redone every 6 months? which like just sounds like an expensive way to treat it. So and it's not going to be widely available till July, August, September, October. And for one, I've never taken a flu vaccine. I'm not going to take it. Yeah. So then our school's going to force kids to take it, even though we know that it doesn't have transmissibility. And then I want to opt out of that as a parent based on religious beliefs. And then what do I do for that? So I don't see the vaccine as the panacea. I don't see the economic recovery that the stock market's building in. And I don't see why every single day the stock market goes up despite valuations that make no sense, interest rates that are low, unemployment that's there, and this vaccine is going to save us. But all we can do is open the economy. That's the only thing left to solve where we're at.
Well, you got an interesting point right there. I mean, when it comes to when this vaccine is available, right? I mean, you're seeing already. You're starting to see some chatter about like, okay, well, if you can't come back to work until you get a vaccine, or your kids can't go to school till you get a vaccine. So already, right there, you're already seeing kind of the beginnings of this this debate on is it your decision or not? You know, on something that
you're injecting a virus that has been developed by pharmacy companies over 6 months. And viruses kill people. So what are we doing? Like Mark Rossano, who I've had on the podcast a number of times, talks about the flu vaccine. And since 2012, deaths of flu in children has increased because the use of flu vaccines has increased. And maybe we're preventing some of the flu strains that would just generally be mild and you'd be building immunity. But then when you get hit with something, you get crushed. Because and think about all the things in the last couple of years. Antibiotics. What did we say about antibiotics? Doctors are prescribing them too frequently so that we're killing bugs that we don't really need to kill.
You're developing
we're developing a stronger strain. Yep. But yet somehow everyone has forgot that and said, well, hold on, I'm under 50. I'm healthy. I work out. I drink too much. I'm going to try and stop that. But I'm not going to die of coronavirus. I'm not. So why the hell am I taking a vaccine? My parents can take a vaccine if they want, but I don't need one. My kids don't need one. What are we doing? So I am deeply concerned about the 1984, thou shalt get a vaccine, otherwise you can't come. Thou shalt wear a mask forever. Thou shalt only live in this community. Thou shalt pay reparations to the Black community. Thou
shalt limit what you want to communicate on a social media platform.
We're headed a very, very bad and scary way, and it's going to take people to rise up. But like, there's a reason that the cities of America didn't burn when Trump lost, and that's because Republicans went about thinking about their tax planning so that they could avoid a raise in capital gains rates and income rates, and they didn't be bothered with going to march in the streets and burning down things because that's not the Republican way. That's why the cities didn't burn, and the reason that they were boarded up is because that's what Democrats do. And I'm not trying to again, disenfranchise young people with nothing to lose and no money who are camping downtown, who are looking for a reason because they're disenfranchised that they didn't get the same outcome as Bob. Even if they didn't work in grade 3 and they didn't go to college because they chose not to and they got horrible grades, they want the same outcome. They're mad and they smash windows. That's just not the Republican way.
Well, you can understand the frustrations, the anger. I mean, you're told to stay at the house, you're told to lock in, all that stuff, and now you lost your job. Or if you do go back to work, it's like, okay, well, if I'm a bartender or someone that a hairstyle or something like that, you rely on foot traffic. And now you're saying, okay, well, you can't operate with foot traffic right now. So I get the frustration. I mean, I get the anger and the you know what, fuck it, let's do this. Let's do it.
But notice that no one is actually protesting the lockdowns. And when we protested the lockdowns in small groups in April, the media shouted it down. Look at the super spreader events. Don't have Thanksgiving. Governor Newsom in California said, you can't sing. You can't have more than 3 families. Don't have Thanksgiving. And yet he was at a large party. Pelosi was organizing a large party. And the media didn't come out when 10,000 Biden supporters were out. I mean, at least they didn't say that the Trump rally this weekend was a super spreader event, because the hypocrisy of that is beyond crazy. Mm-hmm. But if you can have 10,000 people in that proximity, why can't we have stadiums open?
Right.
Why can't we have restaurants open at full capacity? Why, if you're unhealthy, don't go. Like, again, why are we making bad choices, but we still haven't had riots against the lockdowns and the theft of our personal freedoms? I wonder if it's going to come or if we're just going to be sheep. and let the government run roughshod over everybody.
I'll bet cheap. But I mean, I honestly look, if this thing was like a child killer, you know what I mean, or killed, young professionals from 20 to 40 years old, I would have a different mindset about this, or a different outlook on this. You know what I mean? Would your outlook change? I'm the same.
Well, I mean, for sure. I mean,
yeah.
Just generally, the kids are the future. The 20 to 40-year-olds are in the workforce paying income tax. Yeah. And when you think about, like, again, and people say, oh, that's such a horrible, you're over 65. Okay, well, here's some entitlements. Social Security was put in 1935 when the average life expectancy was 61. You did not get it until you were 65. At the time, there were 16 workers for every one retired person that was paying into it.
Okay.
Life expectancy has gone from 61 in 1935 to right now it's 80. And Social Security, you still get at 65. So now there's 15 years when you weren't even supposed to be alive to get it. And there's 3 workers for every one retired person in the United States, which is why Social Security, you need to raise the age to 80. But everyone over 65 that's not in the workforce is actually a drain on the economy. I love my parents, but they're a drain on the economy because they use healthcare, they use Social Security, they make insurance cost a lot more. I want them to be alive. Don't take it that way. But kids are the ones who are paying for them. 20 to 40 are paying for them. Look at Japan. Japan has this crisis. It's a 30-year crisis because it was an aging population and there were no immigration and there was no young people to backfill the workforce. So yes, I would have a different opinion simply because the economy doesn't work without 20 to 40-year-olds. But in this particular case, if the virus is going to kill young and healthy 20 to 40-year-olds, it's going to torch 65-year-olds. So what you're talking about is the bubonic plague.
Yeah.
But the bubonic plague is so deadly, it kills the host so fast, it burns itself out. That's why Ebola and bubonic plague and SARS they killed very high rates of people. But like SARS, I think 9,000 people in the world got it, 900 died.
Yeah.
Because it killed 10%. Ebola is like higher. So yeah, it's just but everything's different. There's no like catch-all. We have to just look at data.
It's funny. We're doing this podcast. We're recording this on November 17th, and this is, I think, the 1-year anniversary from when the first COVID case was discovered in China. Do you know that?
I didn't know that it was November 17th. I knew that it had been circulating. And again, if it's like a flu season starts in September and ends in April, May. What I don't understand is why we didn't reset the numbers. Like, why is the media obsessed with going back to the beginning of time? We're now in COVID season 2020, 2021, just like we're in flu season 2020, 2021. So what we should now do is reset all the numbers and reset the counts, because we also know that when this came out in March, we didn't have the right testing. And the CDC themselves said there was 10 times the number of cases that were unreported than were reported. The high, I believe, in the United States was 62,000 cases. Times 10 was 620,000 cases. Randomized studies done in Massachusetts and California showed that up to 15% of the population had the antibodies in March, which meant that like 15% of 320 million is 45 million Americans already had it in March. So when you use the correct case numbers, we're not at all-time highs right now. We're not even close, because the deaths reflect the number of cases that there actually were. So scale up the deaths from then, and we know there were 620 or 1 million cases a day back then. We're not in as bad a flu season right now. And I don't understand why the media aren't being intellectually honest about that and saying it's not going anywhere. It's a virus. Here's where the season is, and protect yourself. The governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, had a great op-ed in October. And she said, I fully respect and support you wearing a mask, but I leave it to South Dakotans to protect South Dakotans and to make the choices that are best for them and their family. It's not my job to mandate a mask. It's not my job to close their businesses. It's my job to provide knowledge. And knowledge is wash your hands, wear a mask if you're at risk, and if you're scared, don't go out. But everyone else, go about your business. I think that that's such a great practical approach.
So two things before we kind of conclude this. What, for people out there right now that are kind of, that are kind of tired of, the overflow of news, the fear, the bullshit. Where do you get your information from? I mean, what news outlets do you go to kind of get away from all the clutter bullshit and kind of get some actual solid news?
So, interesting question. I find Fox and CNN so brutal. So sometimes I go and just check for headlines to see if anything's going on. As weird as this sounds, I actually go to Twitter, and I follow people that I trust. Yeah, and I make sure that I follow people on both sides. So people who are very pro lockdown and very anti lockdown, but the people who are generally trustworthy. And then when they say something or link to an article, I typically read the articles that they're I never don't read the article if I'm going to engage in a Twitter. It's just seeing 3 lines and saying I think is irresponsible. So I try to do that. I try and check the CDC sites. If something is interesting being talked about, like this vaccine, I've been Googling a lot about the vaccine. I posted a question on Twitter and someone trolled me for it. I said, why are more people not talking about the fact that the Pfizer vaccine needed to be transported at minus 70 degrees Celsius?
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of stories. Now, the vaccine was early, but that was a big question. And then someone pointed me to 4 articles that came out, and that was helpful. The guy's like, it's not that hard to Google. You should just Google it. And you don't even know the average temperature the vaccines are stored. You shouldn't be weighing in on this. Shut up. I'm like, well, first of all, I was asking a question. Secondly, I'm openly challenging the valuation in the stock market. Going in January, February, the S&P was 3,400. Year to date, the S&P is up 12%. At the same time as we've dropped interest rates, the economy, the GDP fell by 33%. Most people are running out of money. There is a eviction moratorium on landlords. Mortgage delinquencies are as high as they were in 2008. And yet the stock market is at an all-time high, and it's driven up by the news of a vaccine that has to be transported at minus 70. And no one is asking the question as to how they're going to do that. So that's where I get my news is I'll pose questions on Twitter. People typically respond with an article, or I'll read people that I follow and see what they're saying. And I try and gather all the data that I can, and then I do additional research.
David, I kind of want to wrap this up. You just made an excellent point right there, which I don't think a lot of people do. It's comfortable to read news articles that kind of confirm your thoughts or your biases or whatever that is. But you made a point that you follow both sides or both sides of an argument just so you kind of can understand where both camps are coming from and kind of what the facts or data or emotion even behind those things. So I encourage everyone out there. I mean, if you do take a hard stance, I mean, get both sides of the story. It's that way you can speak to things and it's more educated conversation versus an argument.
Well, and I think, the thing on that I'd also say is what has been, I don't know if it's good, but what's come out of COVID for me is I believe in intellectual consistency. And so my anti-mask stance is a choice stance.
Yes. And
it has made me review my seatbelt choice. I don't believe that seatbelts should be a law. Now, I could make the case that for parents, that if you have a child under 12 that can't make a decision for themselves, that there should be a seatbelt law because there's a public good. But if you want to drive around in a car and not wear a seatbelt, I don't know why I would weigh in on that. I'm not going to go into a pro-life versus pro-choice argument, but I find the intellectual inconsistency of if masks work, then everyone should be wearing them. Why can't people just wear condoms and not get people pregnant? And then we don't need abortions. And so to be intellectually honest, if you're pro-mask, you should be pro-condom, which means that you're also pro-life, which means you shouldn't support abortion. And so I, again, regardless of where you are on that, the point was not to have like a pro-life, pro-choice, but the point was I have challenged every one of my personally held beliefs to be consistent with the framework under which I make the mask. I no longer donate to charity. That's been sad for me.
You no longer what?
Donate to charity.
Okay.
The way the government snapped their fingers and have basically shut down businesses and not other businesses, I don't see charities as the right way to do that. So I give my dollars to people directly. Like our family has $100 tip. So if there's someone in the service industry, whether it's a restaurant or an Uber driver or, you know, a doorman or someone, if someone's doing something amazing that just needs to be called out, we all carry a $100 bill around, and we have it as our family donation for the whatever, the day, the week, the month. And so we don't give to organized charities anymore. We give to people, because it's not about the write-off. It's about this person needs $100 cash because they have really shitty customers and everyone's grumpy and the restaurant's closed and they don't know how they're going to feed. Here's money. So that has changed my view of individualism. And if I can individually help a person, I would rather do that than help an organization and help a lot of people, because I don't care about a lot of people anymore. I care about individuals. And that's what I've learned from coronavirus, and have been very sequenced about my thinking about testing all my views.
You know what? But that's an excellent point. I mean, you know, people are, you know, they want to do well. They want to, you know, change, I guess, the tone of what's going on, the outside environment, all that stuff, and be like, oh, well, I'm just gonna get on, you know, social media and but no. But you're right, though. It's one of those things. It's being kind to others and taking care of, you know, your neighbors, and that's how you're going to kind of get these conversations going, versus just going online and being kind of a, you know, a Twitter troll or a bully or something like that. So anyway, Dad, I appreciate you coming on today. So question, you're in Colorado, right? You're a South Park fan?
I am a South Park fan.
So you're assuming that the virus was manufactured. Could Randy Marsh have any possible reason for the virus? Did you watch the pandemic special?
I did not see the pandemic
God.
special. You'll have to explain. You'll have to
No. I'm not going to explain it. For anyone out there listening, you got to watch the pandemic special. I think it's clear. I think they do such a good job on hitting on every little hot topic. But anyway, watch the pandemic special with a cocktail. You'll love it.
Don't you miss when comedy used to be just about being funny, and you didn't have to be woke, and you didn't have to like you could apologize. You could make jokes because like humor is a great, like when you remember, I don't know if you remember Colbert Nation, and what did Stephen Colbert's show on Comedy Central was absolute comedic genius, because through his cynicism and his reporting the news in one way, he was actually sort of presenting both sides, and you knew that it was satire, and he could say whatever he wanted. And now this whole cancel Kevin Hart for saying a joke 10 years ago, you know, gauging, like, why are we going back 30 years and saying, well, you know, so-and-so had blackface, and so we should cancel him in 2020, when maybe it wasn't a great idea in 1990, but there was a lot of shit that we did in 1990 that is not a good idea now. I don't think that people should be like canceled based on that. And we've come to this whole world, and I do think that the election was a repudiation of Trump as a leader, appropriately probably, and it was a repudiation of socialism and the swing to the progressive side of the Democratic Party, because they didn't win the Senate, they didn't win the House, they won the House, but they've lost seats. And that really, if Trump had been a little bit more humble and a little bit less combative, he would have won in a landslide. Yeah. And I think that maybe that's the turning point for America that's hopeful, is that the American is now frustrated by leaders who aren't doing what we need. And so maybe a move to the middle is a good thing. We will see.
So you're kind of you're hopeful but pessimistic at the same time. Even though hope's not a plan.
Hope is not a plan. I'm very pessimistic, and it makes me sad. I just, you can't pass a $3 trillion stimulus plan. It's a Band-Aid, because you're keeping people aren't flying, so don't keep employees. I hate to say it, but we don't need to manufacture airplanes. We don't need more crew. We don't need more restaurants. Like, we need to let the damage be done, and then we need to focus on creating jobs in sectors of the economy that can get those people back to work. But like giving money to local governments that lost their tax base and income, like all of it is just so bad, and it's such leakage. And it's so bad for the US dollar and for our kids and for the economy long term. And that this ends so badly. So I am very pessimistic. I just hope some intelligent thought comes out of Washington in the next 6 months.
Well, that's a great note to leave us on, David. I appreciate the pessimism, and all that. No, but I get it, man. I mean, what you're speaking. I mean, I think a lot of people that are listening to you, that follow you, kind of are feeling these frustrations and that are feeling this lack of faith in the government to do what's right for them. But anyway, I don't want to take up any more time. I appreciate you coming on, and David, again, thank you. And for anyone that wants to check out David's content, you could just Google, Hot Take of the Day. Check out his podcast and blog, and also What the F is Wrong with Everyone Else, What They Don't Teach You in Business School. Again, that's available on Amazon. Again, good luck today with that letter from the attorney, and I hope to see you back on LinkedIn sometime soon, buddy.
Myself as well, JP. Thanks so much for having me, and to all your listeners, you can always, if you ever want to just chat or engage, you can always email me at drw@hottakeoftheday.com.
And that's something else too. You always respond to that.
I always do. And I've given up my cell phone a number of times. Right now, I'm not a Great Depression buddy, so I haven't been given my cell phone out to be helpful like I was earlier in the pandemic. But at some point, I will find the light again, and then I'll get my cell phone again.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it, and take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Don't forget a picture.
We got the pic. All right. No, hold on.